Oh, goodness, folks, that's the Slocan Ramblers playing live today. And the Mississippi Heavy Water Blues. That's an old song, right?
Yeah, that's a song I first heard by Roscoe Holcomb.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite banjo players, and it was on an album that I had, and then I kept listening to that song over and over again and thought it would be kind of a fun one to bring to the band. It was really quick to arrange it, like it just sort of took place, and it was really fun. And then I found out later, someone came to our show and told us that the sort of the original recording comes from Barbecue Bob, which is an amazing blues, 12-string guitar player, which is still, I think, our favorite, stage name out there. Unless it's not a stage name, I don't know. I have to see his passport.
Could be his given name, yeah. All right. Slocan Ramblers, based out of Toronto. So, I mean, I know you're getting asked this a lot, but how do you come into this? It's essentially Appalachian music that you guys are playing. Where'd you learn it? Where's it come from?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think for all of us, we have maybe different answers. I personally, I grew up listening to different kinds of folk music and was always a fan of acoustic music. I remember my first time hearing bluegrass. I think I was 16 or 17, and I got I got my parents' old record player up and running. They kind of had it in their basement, and my grandfather had it. He passed on, we got it, and I got that up and running. And I've had a bunch of my uncle's old records, and he was mostly just into like. He was like Depeche Mode and like Yes records and stuff, but there was a Doc Watson record in there, and I had heard of him. I never heard it, and I put it on, and it was the live record, him and Merle doing a live double album, and I put it on, and it just blew me away. I thought it was amazing. I never heard anything like that before, and yeah, I remember that was the first time I ever heard anything that was close to bluegrass, and then from there I kind of discovered Tony Rice and Norman Blake, and got really excited about bluegrass and started playing with a few friends, and then I was living in Montreal where I grew up at the time, and then I moved to Toronto and discovered that Toronto had a pretty happening bluegrass scene. There was a few weekly gigs, a few bands that were really great, and actually there's probably like 5 or 6 weekly bluegrass shows in Toronto. And I personally just started going out to a bunch of them to just check it out and kind of finding anyone who would play it. And yeah, that and just discovering loads and loads of old records. And, anything that was on YouTube. Can't deny that we learned how to play bluegrass in the digital age. There's no way around that. But there's just so much out there now. It's like you could discover any kind of music living in any part of the world, really. It's funny, just on Facebook lately, I've had a whole bunch of people from Thailand and India add me and they're mandolin bluegrass players. Yeah. I don't know who they are, but they're just good sounding, Thai and Indian people playing bluegrass. So it's cool to be here in the epicenter of bluegrass country, and it's also probably like for us it's just a different style of music. It's probably pretty crazy for you guys that it has this international reach at this point.
It's funny, about a year or two ago I interviewed a Japanese guitar player whose name escapes me now, but he had such a similar story to yours. He was playing Japanese folk music and someone gave him a Doc Watson record and he started playing bluegrass.
It's all about Doc. I mean, Doc is. There's something about his pocket. Like it was just like I think it was like the funkiest guitar playing I'd ever heard. Like it was so heavy, the rhythm was so deep that that's what kind of threw me in there. Yeah.
His right hand was like a jackhammer, right?
It was, yeah. And
gosh,
I was listening to like Mississippi John Hurt. I was a big fan of that kind of acoustic blues playing, so that was. Pretty easy way to get into it. I heard him playing fingerstyle, and that was what really got me. I don't know, everyone in the band probably has a different story.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more stories, but kind of folk music. I mean, it really seems like there's that element in your approach to the music, kind of the folk sound as well. But anyone else?
Yeah, I kind of discovered it or found out about it. I had a guitar teacher when I was younger named Stefan who kind of made me hip to Tony Rice and Brent Mason, and he said these guys they pick all their notes and they're playing on acoustic guitars, and like the sheer kind of power and tone they can get out of their instruments is like, you should really check it out. It's really cool. And I kind of got into it then, and I was checking out a lot of stuff at the time. But I grew up like 20 minutes from a town called Tottenham, where they have the Tottenham Bluegrass Festival, where they'd have acts like, Doyle Lawson would come up and Josh Williams and kind of all sorts of things. And I remember going as a kid a lot and kind of hearing banjos all the time and stuff. And I didn't really get into it until I saw a band called the Creaking Tree String Quartet, and this is at one of those kind of folk alliance type things somewhere in Memphis. And I kind of followed them around all the times they were showcasing, and sometimes I'd be the only one in the room kind of watching them. And they probably thought I was a bit creepy, but I ended up finding out they all lived in Toronto, and they all played every Wednesday night at the Silver Dollar Room, and you could go for $3 and hear 3 hours of bluegrass. So that was kind of my foray into it.
Any other great stories there?
Yeah, I mean, we all sort of discovered. I mean, I started playing banjo when I was quite young. I just heard a concert of it was called the Banjo Special, and it was all these different styles of banjo. There was Irish tenor banjo and plectrum banjo, and 2 old time players, 2 clawhammer players, and a bluegrass player. And the old time stuff just really kind of stuck with me. I was about 10 years old, 9 or 10. and started taking lessons off a guy named Chris Cool, who's an amazing banjo player from Toronto. And within the first year, he was like, "You got to go down to this festival called Clifftop
Oh, yeah.
in West Virginia." And so my parents were really cool. They packed up the car and we drove down to West Virginia. It was like, I think, one of the very first sort of family holidays we ever did. And it was a change for us. It was different, but it was fun. And you know, you just go there and you play lots of tunes, and you come back with 10 times as many tunes. as you know.
You're warped for life, aren't you?
It's right, yeah, exactly. And one of the coolest things too, I remember going down there. They have this record shop. I can't remember the name of the guy who runs it, but he comes to Clifftop every year, and he's got just incredible amounts of these old records you can't find anywhere else. So I'd like save up my allowance all year, and we'd go down to Clifftop, and I'd buy as many records as I could with that.
And so you were playing clawhammer. You play a lot of clawhammer still.
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
were-
We'll play a couple tunes in a bit on clawhammer. But then I met these guys later and got really hooked on bluegrass and put the clawhammer down for a little bit. And then, now kind of our show is almost, I reintroduced it, and it's maybe half and half clawhammer.
I was gonna say at some point, I'll say it now. I love that element of your record that it's not. It's bluegrass. It's old time. It's folk. It's all mixed up, and the
Right.
clawhammer's so sweet in there.
Yeah,
it
it's
still
right.
drives the way
We
you
play
play
all
it.
kinds of music, country and western.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. Alistair, anything else?
Yeah, sure. I mean, how did I get into bluegrass? I guess so. I grew up on the east coast of Canada, in Newfoundland, so far east on
beautiful.
on an island way out in the cold North Atlantic. And I guess I grew up around a lot of fiddle music, a lot of
Right.
East Coast kind of Celtic music and stuff. And so I grew up around like kind of that community and a lot of that. And then I moved to Toronto to study jazz. I was really into jazz music. Went to school, which is where I met a couple of these guys. And but yeah, I mean, I listened to a little bit of bluegrass growing up. There's a couple guys around in St. John's, but it wasn't that big a thing out there. But when I got to Toronto, I was studying a lot of jazz, and then I kind of got swept up in the kind of music scene in Toronto. And like they were saying, there's just so much bluegrass there, and really good bluegrass. So there's that one show in particular every Wednesday. It was this like big hub in Toronto. It was like $3, and you could go see the Foggy Hogtown Boys, or Crazy Strings as they were called at that point. And I just kind of, they were a really good band. Their repertoire was awesome. They were all kind of fun guys, and I just kind of got swept up in it, and the community and the music, and it kind of was a different version of the kind of the music I'd grown up with. So I just kind of, I don't know, never looked back, I guess. Jumped on board, got on the bluegrass train.
Never looking back, huh? So that's the Slocan Ramblers. Again, they're playing as part of that huge Jam in the Trees at Black Mountain. Gets underway tonight, and then all day tomorrow, all night tomorrow. They're on in the afternoon tomorrow. Yeah, let's get another song. What's your next tune?
We'll do one of my tunes. This is a mandolin song called